Hello YouTubers, and welcome back, and of course welcome to my new Chess Academy 2.1. This new series is for all ages and parents, as the game of chess itself is regaining its popularity worldwide. For example, maybe you're a parent of a child who wants to learn how to play the game, but you don't even know how to play chess yourself. So this new series of videos will get both you and your kids on your way to becoming great chess players. In this first video, I'm going to be starting from the very beginning, from a blank board to chess notation and the setup of the pieces. I'll also show you some samples, pictures of your basic chess sets, your tournament chess sets, and things like that. And then for my second video, I'll go into how the pieces move and how they capture and things like that. Okay. The longest and the most difficult thing to remember is old style notation. It's not important that you actually learn the notation from the beginning, but if, for example, if you have a child who's really interested in getting to learn how to play the game and wants to play in chess clubs and things like that later on, chess notation is very important. And as far as the old style notation is concerned, there's still books being published with that old notation in it, even though from the 70s up they switched to the algebraic notation. So let's go ahead and get started. What you see in front of you, of course, is a blank chessboard except for the kings. Okay, the first thing to remember is that a light square always goes on your right side. Now you may have chessboards that don't have the notation on, you know, the letters A through H and then the ranks from 1 through 8. So on those chessboards, always put a light square on your right side. That's the way the game is normally played. I may be the only one to tell you this. There's so many chess variations out there. I will say that if you are of the persuasion to say, well, I want black to go first, there's nobody stopping you from turning the board around. Okay. That's upside down, but I mean, what you would do is, let me go ahead and show you. These are the chessboards that are available, by the way. These vinyl chessboards are literally $3 to $5, sometimes $8, depending on what grade you buy. They come in lots of colors, but there's nobody stopping you from taking a chessboard and flipping it sideways. Just generally speaking, do it without the notation on it. And what you would do is you would set up the pieces the way you normally would set them up, that is, queen takes her own color, and you let black go first. I don't do that. There's no chess program out there that I know of that lets you do that, but it's okay if that's what you know. In any case, that's just a little ditty on the idea. As it is, chess is played on an 8 by 8 checkerboard, chessboard. You have ranks and files, ranks 1 through 8, files A through H. White gets set up on the side with the A in the left hand corner. Okay. I'll let you see that for a minute. Okay. So let's talk about the chessboard. Let's get rid of this yellow square here. So how does chess notation work? It's very simple, really. Have any of you ever played Battleship? You have a 10 by 10 board, A through J and 1 through 10. You got 100 pegs, holes to plot your battleships in. So a chessboard is the same thing, except that it's 8 by 8 with 64 squares. Very simply, this is the square E4. Okay? Just as this is the square C, 3. Okay? Etc. so forth and so on. So essentially you can name every single square just by following the ranks and files. Okay? And the files are always mentioned first. That is, the letter is always mentioned first. So this square, for example, is F5. Okay? So you have F5. Okay? The reason for chess notation is manyfold. For one thing, this is known as algebraic notation. It's in the modern chess starting probably in the 70s, I believe, when computers first started coming out. It's a twofold reason. Back in the old days, back in the 1700s, and even in the 1800s, and even early 1900s, chess was written down by using the old style notation, you know, things like pawn to queen's bishop 3, that sort of thing, you know. And it's hard to follow that, and it's hard to write that down all the time, especially when you're trying to concentrate on the game. For me, for example, even this new style notation, I get distracted easily, and even just writing down the new notation can be a little distracting. But writing down the old notation is very long-winded, and you end up with a notebook of paper just trying to copy down one game. So the new style notation was for two reasons. One, to make it easier for professional chess players to write the game down and to be later studied, which is why there's so many chess books published. The other reason is because right around the same time, computers started to become a thing. So naturally, programmers wanted to try to, you know, work with computer intelligence, quote unquote, you know, so to speak. And you can't program a computer, or at least not really, trying to tell the computer pawn to queen's bishop 3 and all that stuff. It just becomes a ridiculous task. Algebraic notation, because the computer is a mathematical machine, is a graph. It is a plot on a map, so to speak. It's a two-dimensional, you know, length times width. And a computer programmer easily is able to plot these things, and it becomes something a computer can use easily to make pieces move and stuff like that. So, not that I'm a computer programmer and I don't know how to make my own chess program, but that's the way it's done. Of course, I also want to give credit to those people, those grandmasters and masters who were able to translate, and that is the right word, I think, translate the old books into new notation. There's lots of old games out there translated. In fact, I have in my database on my computer, I think something like 3 or 4 million games. Many of them came from the you know, early 19th century and stuff like that. They had to be translated into algebraic notation in order to put them in a computer database. So kudos to those people. Okay, so let's get started. How do pieces get set up? Now that you know about the new algebraic notation, let's look at the board with the pieces getting set up. All right, let's show you how this program works. I'm going to position setup. So you see in front of you where I can actually set up a position if I want to study some chess position. But we're going to use it to train you. Again, the light square always goes on your right side. The king is always on E. The king takes its opposite color. An easy way to remember where the king and the queen goes is that the queen takes her own color. So the light queen goes on the light square, and the dark queen goes on the dark square. And you have opposing kings and opposing queens. Okay? When I finish this, I'll also talk to you more about old style notation, because in order to know old style notation, you have to see the pieces all completely set up. So finishing this up, then you have the rooks that look like castles. Some people call them castles, but the proper name is rook. Okay, they go in the corners. Okay. Then you have the knights. Think of them as the knights protecting the castles. It's an easy way to remember that. And the king and the queen each get their own bishop. Okay? Alright? So it's queen takes her own color, king next to it. If you have a board with the notation on the side, if you're playing white, always have the letter A on your left side. If you're playing black, always have the A on your right side. I'll show you. I'll flip the board for you later and I'll show you. The pawns all go directly in front of the major pieces. Okay? So let's go ahead and put those there. Okay? And there is the proper way to set up a chessboard. Okay? So to show you that flip board, you'll see that now that I flipped the board, the notation starts from H when you're playing black. Okay? You'll notice that the king is on your left, on the left instead of the right. I'll flip it again. Okay? But always, the kings and the queens are opposing each other. So if you set up a board, no, that didn't work. So if you set up a board, and you notice something wrong, okay, where is this coming from? All right, come on. I'm trying to clear this and I can't. All right, well, we're going to clear it anyway. We're just going to go ahead and position set up. Sorry about that. Here, just reset the board. There we go. So if you set up a board and you notice the kings and the queens aren't opposing each other, you know you've set it up wrong. So the queen takes her own color, the rooks go in the corners, the knights directly next to them, and the bishops go next to the king and the queen. Okay? Just take a look at that for a moment. Okay. So, going back to the notation, first with the new algebraic notation. This is short algebraic notation. That is, they don't necessarily mention the square that it's come from. For example, I can move E2 to E4, but the short way of saying that is simply E4. And you'll see, if you play this in high definition, by the way, always, the writing on the right hand side of your screen, where my mouse is pointing to, you'll see that it says E4. Okay? If I were to move a knight, well, if it's going to let me move. Okay, switch engine off. Let's do that. Okay, here we go. Alright, you'll see this says N for knight C6. Now, I know that the word knight, as far as a horse with a soldier on it, is spelt K-N-I-G-H-T. But in the algebraic notation, because of the confusion with king starting with a K and knight starting with a K, they use the letter N, capital N, for knight. So the major pieces, well, major and minor pieces are capitalized letter. The files are small letter. So you can see it says for the pawn move it was E4. For the knight to c6, you see that it's a capital N for knight and a small c and 6, okay? That's how algebraic notation, that's how short algebraic notation works, okay? There are, going into now the older notation, there are some early translated notation that use KN for knight and K for king. I have one of those books. I don't have a camera to show you at the moment. I have a camera, but I don't have batteries in it right now. But you might see in some early translated books that they use KN for knight. So don't be alarmed. But that's how you read, if you're going to use a book to study some chess moves and stuff like that, that's how you read the notation. So what about old notation? What would I say if I were to move this pawn in old notation? I would say pawn the king 4. And for the knight, I would say knight to queen's bishop 3. So what they do in old notation is they mention whose piece it belongs to. So when you set up the original chessboard, you have the king, his bishop, his knight, his rook, the queen, her bishop, her knight, and her rook. And it works both for black and white. You don't have the new style notation. You don't have the ranks 1 through 8. You count the squares starting from the back to the forward, no matter whether you're playing black or white. So this is knight to queen's bishop 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay? That's how that works. You move the knight to the queen's bishop. Now, you don't have to say queen's knight to queen's bishop 3. They might have done that too, but to shorten that, it's understood that this knight can only move there. Now, there is both old and new style notation. There is a way of mentioning a piece first, because sometimes a piece can both go to the same place. Let me see if I can set up a position where I can do that. Okay, let's do this. I'm just moving these pieces out of the way. Okay, so let's say I want to move a knight to this square, but it turns out that both of these knights, I know that you don't know how pieces move yet, and you're wondering what I'm doing with these knights. They're moving in an L shape. I'll get to how the pieces move later, but it's important that you know this notation. Oops. Okay, both of these knights, for example, can go to this square right now. That is C3, okay? So, in new notation, I have to specify which knight I'm talking about. If I want to move this knight, I say knight A, C3. If I want to move this knight, I say knight E, C3. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And you'll see on your right side of the screen, it says capital N, small e, small c3. So it's knight on E to C3. If I were to say this in old chess style notation, I would either mention whether it was the queen's knight or the king's knight. Okay? So I would say queen's knight to queen's bishop 3, or king's knight to queen's bishop 3. Okay? Where the confusion starts in the old style notation, and I'm sure there's been plenty of mistakes made because of it, is because what happens when both knights end up on the same side of the board? As you can see, that both of these guys did. Well, let's see. Let's move this one here just for the fun of it. And let's just move this one here for the fun of it. Okay, so now what happens when both of these knights are on the same side of the board? Now, generally speaking, what the way they used to do it was they just simply tell you that it's still, you have to remember which one was the queen's knight, which one was the king's knight. Or they might have said, they might have mentioned another piece, for example. So it would be, they might have said something like, and I'm not even sure of this to tell you the truth, they might have said for this knight, they might say rook knight the queen's bishop 3, or queen's knight the queen's bishop 3, or they would say the queen's knight the queen's bishop 3, and hoping that you'll remember which one it was. So as you can see, the old style notation can get confusing. Of course, again, in the new style notation, it's very easy. It would be knight on D to C3, or the knight on A to C3. So you can see how the new style notation is a much better way to do things, aside from being able to punch it into a computer very easily. Okay? So let's go back. Let's cancel this. Let's go back. So this is how a chessboard is set up. Let me see what I wanted to cover. I told you I was going to start from the beginning in the setup of the pieces and the notation. In my second video, I told you I was going to go through how the pieces move and capturing. Well, needless to say, I've just been showing you how a knight moves. I'm going to end this video with that. Just want you to remember that when you set up a board, it's always the light square on the right. Queen takes her own color. And just remember where the rest of the pieces go. I also might want to start telling you about the piece value. I could probably do that a little bit right now. For now, you've already seen me move the knight several times. The knight is the only one that can jump over pieces. They do not capture that way. Okay? Just for a quick note, and let me just, okay, for a quick note, all pieces capture by landing on the square that they're capturing. So the knight moves in an L shape. It can move one square, then two. It could capture this pawn, for example. Okay? Cannot land on your own spot. Alright? So that's the way that works. But we'll get into that a little later. Since I've been using the knights all this time, I'll continue to make sure you know how the knight moves. The knight is the only piece that can jump over pieces, and they do not capture that way. A knight moves by moving one square and then two, or two squares and then one. In other words, in an L shape. A one square, then two. Okay? It's an L shape. Okay, just remember that. It's a very special way the knights move. The only piece that can jump over pieces. Pawns are the point value, that is the lowest point value. They're 1 point worth, but they actually can be the most important piece on the board. I'll get into that. I'll explain that in the next video when I get into piece value, how the pieces move. I'll go one by one on each piece and how it moves, how pieces capture, and then I also have to go into how to check and checkmate. What is the difference between the two, and things of that nature. For now, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I hope this new series of my new Chess Academy 2.1, is going to be the playlist. I hope that this helps you and your family learn how to play the game. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and keep on playing.